How long does it take to purchase real estate in New York City? My answer to that is in New York City, buying an apartment can take anywhere from weeks to months to get to closing. And a lot of buyers don't really understand the different steps you have to go through. My name is Chris Jordan. I'm a luxury real estate agent right here in New York City. And in this video, we're going over every step you need to know when buying an apartment in New York City, from pre-approval to closing. Before we get into the different steps, I do always like to explain how New York City is different than other markets. In other markets, especially the suburban markets, a lot of times the process goes, you find a neighborhood, you find a home in that neighborhood, and you're good to go, right? New York City, it could be a little bit different because you don't only have to find a neighborhood, but you might have to find the sub-neighborhood in a neighborhood. So let me give you an example, and I won't go in depth about different neighborhoods in New York City because I do have my neighborhood guide. But let's take a neighborhood like Chelsea. Chelsea is one of our trendy neighborhoods. A lot of times buyers come to me and they say, Chris, I want to live in Chelsea. Then I try to explain to them all different sub-neighborhoods in Chelsea is different. East Chelsea is different than the heart of Chelsea. The heart of Chelsea is different than the west of Chelsea. And then you have north of the neighborhood. And sometimes people think Hudson Yards is Chelsea. Then you have south of the neighborhood where you have almost a meatpacking West Village influence. So knowing exactly where you want to live in a neighborhood is extremely important. Then once you choose the neighborhood and the sub-neighborhood, you then got to get into comparing buildings. We could go back to Chelsea, for example, West Chelsea specifically. West Chelsea have some units where art galleries was converted into lofts, and then a few streets adjacent, you may see a new development glass building with water views. So it could be two streets right next to each other with totally different values. You can also have two buildings with identical purchase price, but different carrying costs. You have different ownership structures. So I say all that to say, it is imperative that you get an advisor in New York City that not only know neighborhoods, but know the different buildings, because it will save you a ton of time. But let's move on to step one. Step one is getting financially ready. And to get financially ready, it depends on what path you're taking, but you need one of two things, right? You need either a fully underwritten pre-approval if you're getting a mortgage, and two, if you're paying all cash, you need proof of funds. Moving on to step two, once you're financially ready, you go into the apartment search, and a lot to do with the apartment search is what we spoke about earlier, right? For me, I like my clients to first understand the neighborhoods and the sub-neighborhoods so they can really understand where they want to live. Sometimes a client will tell you they want to live in Soho, but they really describe in Tribeca and they want nothing to do with Soho. So really understanding exactly not only what neighborhood they want to live in, but where they want to live at. With that being said, once you know what neighborhood you want to live in, where in the neighborhood you want to live, the next thing is evaluating different buildings. I like to call them must-haves, like-to-haves, and deal breakers. So this is budget, views, amenities, finishes, things of that nature, all the little intricates, right? What I like to do is send my clients some buildings that I think they may be interested in off of what they told me. Now, of course, buyers like to explore the internet. They may send me some buildings from StreetEasy or Zillow, and I'll let them know if it's worth pursuing or not. Now, the fun part start. You start touring apartments. Maybe you have to adjust the search now that you're starting to see what's on the market, things of that nature. But to move the steps along, let's say you find the apartment you love. You find the apartment you love, we move in to step four, which is negotiations. Step four, negotiations. And in New York City, negotiation, this step is very important. Well, in any market, this step is very important. But this step is important in New York City specifically because New York City apartments are sold in as-is condition, which means that you're purchasing an apartment as-is condition it was in when you signed the contract. Additionally, I just always negotiate everything, never assume. There's different taxes, contingencies, have great clarity when negotiating. So it's much more than the purchase price. The purchase price is just the beginning in negotiations. So once the two agents or the advisor and the seller's agent come to terms that both the seller and the buyer is okay with, it gets put on what we like to call a deal sheet. Once these terms are on a deal sheet, we then begin the due diligence process. All deal sheets are turned over to an attorney. In New York City, all buyers are required to have an attorney. I know in some other markets, buyers are not required to have an attorney. That is not the case in New York City, and that is because of this due diligence period. During this due diligence period, the attorney is going to go over reserves, assessments, all the legalities in the deal. Sometimes they would negotiate legal wording with the seller's attorney, but this is an important step. And I always like to tell buyers, I know trust is big in this transaction, especially a transaction as big as buying real estate in New York City. If you want to have an attorney that you trust overseeing a real estate attorney, that is fine. But I would strongly advise you having a real estate attorney, because again, just going back to what we spoke about, the attorney knowing the building is so important. It will save so much time. I'm sure you can have the best attorney in London, but it's just some things in New York City you will have to catch up on that would take some time, right? Even me, I'm in this market every day. Sometimes I call attorneys just to get feedback on buildings, just ask them, have they done deals in buildings? Are there any assessments? Because sometimes buildings will give information to attorneys because they have to, that they wouldn't give to agents, right? So just definitely always have a real estate attorney that has worked in the market. Trust me, it will save you a ton of time. So this due diligence period takes about a week. And once the attorney does his due diligence and he okays it, he turns the deal sheet into a contract, the seller and the buyer signs the contract. Once you sign a contract in New York City, you're required to put down an earnest deposit. The standard amount on an earnest deposit is usually 10%. Now for pre-construction and new development, sometimes it can be 15, 20% just for reserves for the developer. But let's say 10% for this video. 10% earnest deposit is sent to the seller's agent and it's put in an escrow account. So let's recap because we spoke about a lot. First things first, you got your financing right. You got a fully underwritten pre-approval, or you got proof of funds. Second, you chose a neighborhood, but because you watched this video, you also chose a sub-neighborhood. You know exactly where you want to live at, and you know exactly what you want in that neighborhood. You viewed some apartments, you found your dream apartment. Negotiations started, came to terms, the lawyer made the contract, and you signed the contract, earnest deposit is down. You're saying, Chris, we gotta be at the end because I'm tired. We've done a lot, I'm tired, what's next? Step 6 depends if you got financing, but step 6 would be appraisal/mortgage process. So let's talk about the appraisal/mortgage process. So once you put down your earnest deposit, the lender is gonna send out an appraiser. And what the appraiser is going to do is he's going to give an appraised market value. The lender is going to lend off one or two things, either the purchase price or the appraised market value, whichever is lower. So let's say the purchase price is lower than the appraised market value. Awesome, good to go. The bank is happy. They're lending on the asset that they feel like they're getting a discount on. Now let's use numbers. I'm going to use easy numbers. Let's say you offer $4 million. The appraiser comes out to the property and he appraises at $3.5 million. We have an issue. You might say, what's next? Just want to say I'm being super dramatic because in New York City, I've never seen it that big of a gap, but let's talk worst case scenario. In New York City, the things that make it difficult also, in my opinion, makes the appraisal process a little bit easier, because I think I have a video on negotiations on this channel, but we always want to stay inside the building. So everybody should have a great understanding of what the value is. Now, if it's a boutique building and you have to go outside the building, it shouldn't be that big of a gap. So something went terribly wrong, or the buyer overbid it, and we should all know that the buyer overbid it, and that should have been part of negotiations. But let's say none of that happened, right? We got something terrible on our hands. How do we close the gap? Because the bank don't care they're just going to tell you what they're going to lend on that property. The way the gap is closed, we have to go back to the negotiation table, and it's closed between the buyer and the seller. It can be the buyer goes up, adds 250, and the seller takes off 250. It could be 400, 100. The bank don't care, but it's between the buyer and the seller to close the gap. Again, them numbers are dramatic, worst case scenario, but you guys get the gist. Also, you can ask the lender for a second opinion. There can be unique situations and there is human error, but again, everyone should know a ballpark of where the appraised market value is going to come in at. But if not, that's how it's fixed. Now let's move on to step 7. Step 7 is the co-op board approval, right? Now I did a condo versus co-op board, so I won't go too in depth in regards to this topic, even though I am doing an updated one because there are updated rules, so it's only right I update the video. And I'm a little bit more optimistic on co-ops, but I'll say this still staying in 2026.
And I feel bad.
If privacy is of importance to you, I would strongly recommend against co-ops. Co-ops are going to want to talk to the doctor that birthed you, your nanny, your pre-K teacher, and your tutor when you were 6 years old. So if Nana and Grandma don't want to be bothered, don't bother with co-ops. But let's talk about the rule changes. The new rules in regards to co-ops is that co-ops have to let you know they received your application within 15 days, and they have to give you a decision on your application in 45 days. Again, it is going to be a tedious process, and it won't be step 7. You should not start the co-op board package. I mean, your advisor or your agent will take care of it, but this shouldn't be started at step 7. It should be started at more right after the deal sheet. But if you are purchasing a co-op, you do have to get board approval and go through an interview, and there will be no privacy. And yes, that's co-op board approval. So let's recap. We said a lot. You got financing, pre-approval, proof of funds. You know which neighborhood, you found the apartment, you negotiated, signed the contract. If you financing, you went through the mortgage process, went through the appraisal process, co-op board, got approved by the co-op board, and you're like, Chris, we have to be done. Don't tell me there's another step. Step 8, final walkthrough. What's final walkthrough? You just want to walk around, you want to smell around, and you remember that as is clause. You want to make sure everything is as is when you signed the contract. And you probably about to ask me what happened if something is not as is. And to that, I'm going to say it's a beautiful day outside. It's one of our best days. Please don't ruin it for me. No, I'm joking. That is extremely serious. In all honesty, that's serious. And if that do happen, we have to go all the way back to the negotiation process. If something needs to be fixed, there's 1 or 2 things the buyer can do. The first one is get what we like to call a closing credit. Now, you might bring a contract in to see how much it would to bring it back to as is clause. You can get a closing credit or you can walk away from the contract. But, even when it comes to the closing credit, that has to be negotiated because the seller might say, I'm not willing to do that. But because it's so nice out and because we want to move the video along, let's say everything is as is and we're great. The next thing is closing. Funds are transferred, contract is executed, you get the keys, you live happily ever after. Do you have to be there for that? You don't. You can get power of attorney, but that's the end. Now you're probably saying, we went through all this and he still didn't tell us how long it take. So, how long does it take to purchase real estate in New York City? My answer to that is, it depends.
This man.
I know. And I feel like I said this at the end because I feel like you guys should understand after all the steps we went through. But this is a process that can't be rushed, right? And as you guys can see, what I will say is 3 to 6 months is standard. 3 months, it's a pretty good deal, pretty smooth, couple hiccups, we got through it. 6 months, a lot of hiccups, but we got through it, right? You never think about the hiccups when you get through it. Now you might be saying, but Chris, you're a liar because you said weeks in the introduction. I have seen weeks. If it's a new development, sponsor unit, you paying for cash, weeks is possible, not probable, but it is possible, and I have seen it. With that being said, I got a busy day. I have to get going. I just want to get this video out for you guys. Again, my name is Chris Jordan. I'm a luxury real estate agent right here in New York City. You know the timeline now, so if you're looking to move to New York City in the next 6 to 12 months, my email will always be in the description. I'll answer any questions you may have. I also talked about condos versus co-ops a lot, so that might be important. Watch that right here, and I'll see you guys on the next one.